My first takeaway in B2B podcasting is you got to get over it. And what do I mean by get over it? Well, get over that you are a business. You are not an influencer. So what I mean by that is I talk to people, hey, they want to start a podcast, and they right away start saying, well, how do I monetize it? And how do I get millions of hits? And how do I get tens of thousands of hits? And I don't even know what that means, because I'm in business to business. And so I don't have any need for millions of hits. I don't have needs for tens of thousands. I want dozens, maybe hundreds, 1,000, maybe 1,000. Put things in perspective. So it took us 25 years to get our 500th client. So after 25 years, we had 500 clients. That means, the simple math, I did it. We get about 20 clients per year, new ones. That's about 1.6 clients per month. So that's about right. Sometimes we'll get 2 clients in, sometimes we'll get 1 client, sometimes we'll get 3 clients, sometimes 0 clients. Our clients in B2B, for our business, our clients stick with us for a very, very, very long time. What would I do if 1 million people watch this? That would be a disaster. So my point is, business to business is different than a Joe Rogan podcast. So all we're trying to do is influence a group of people, or get in front of a group of people that would benefit our business to a large degree. So that's my takeaway number 1. Number 2, people who are starting podcasts, I tell them this: do 4 first. Just do 4 of them. Why 4? I don't know. I picked 4. My experience is you get about 25% better every time. So after you've done 4, a couple of things happen. One is, if you like it, take note. Hey, you like this. It gives you energy, and you should probably continue doing the podcast. And you're probably getting pretty good at it, because after 4 practice reps, after 4 podcasts, if you like it, chances are you're going to get better at it. You might do forecasts and not like it. It doesn't give you energy. It wears you out. You're thinking, why am I even doing this? And you're dreading the 5th one. Well, hey, good news. You've only done 4. You haven't announced to the world that you have a podcast coming out, and you can still get good leverage out of those 4. But now you haven't committed to this podcast that wears you out, drains you. And chances are you're not going to get very good at it, because most people that I know, if they don't like it and it drains their energy, it's hard to get good at it. So do 4 of them, take a deep breath, check your energy level, and then decide, what you want to do going forward. I'd also wait to name your podcast until you do a few, because frankly, there are a lot of twists and turns in starting a podcast in my experience. Number 3, in person is best. Zoom or Riverside or remote, it'll do. There's no question it'll do. And sometimes that's your only option, but nothing beats in person. So my experience is, hey, find a place where you can invite people in, strengthen the relationship. A lot of value comes before the podcast and after the podcast. This is when most of the connections are really made anyway. The podcast, just the payload of the podcast is a part of it. But in general, you're looking to connect with people, honor people, enjoy people. And I found that in person outweighs remote, but remote will work if you're in a pinch. Number 4, listening is hard. And listening is a skill that I'm certainly still working on. And I think if you really were to take inventory, you would agree that listening is really hard. What I found in the podcast, because I don't do those long form podcasts. My podcasts are usually 20 minutes. I usually say it's a 21-minute blackjack. If we go over 21 minutes, we bust. I try to keep it under 21 minutes. So because I'm trying to keep it under a certain time, 20 minutes, because it's a business podcast, I know the value of listening. So I'm talking to my guests. I'm hopefully letting them talk more than I'm talking, and I'm listening. But boy, is it hard to listen and keep a time. Make sure that the next question's ready to go, and make sure that you have a mission that you need to complete this at a certain amount of time. So much to the point that I have watched the podcast afterwards, and I actually am hearing the guest say something for the first time, almost like I wasn't there, even though I'm working my butt off to listen. Listening is hard, in life, and listening is hard doing podcasts. Number five, speed kills. And let me explain that. It sounds very violent, but it's not. What I mean by speed is doing things quickly and accurately. And this has a double benefit. One, you really want to honor your guest that comes on the show. And I'll tell you, the guests, when they come in and do the podcast and then they leave, they are actually kind of excited. Why wouldn't you be excited? The podcast was about you. So if you take a long time to post it, I think it's human nature. They start wondering, well, why are you taking so long to post it? I've been on a couple of podcast show, and I know other people that have been on podcast show, and they're saying like it was like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, and I haven't seen anything yet. So speed kills for several reasons. One, it honors the guests when you do things quickly and accurately. And two, we usually like to get our podcast up and edited the next day or two. And that is wonderful because it keeps the creative juices going on the actual podcast itself, but then it also frees up our plate that now we can do more work without getting the backlog of editing. So speed is really important. As we say, I like to say, there is no defense for speed. And so being quick and agile and getting lots of reps and doing things quickly and accurately is really important when doing a podcast, because you got to get it out there because it keeps the momentum going for the guest and for the staff. Number 6. So your podcast, what I've noticed, it combats AI. And what I mean by that is in today's AI-driven world, people are very skeptical of what they're reading. I'm skeptical of what I'm reading. I'm wondering if a chat GPT wrote that or if a person wrote that. And I certainly don't mind using AI. So don't get me wrong. Matter of fact, we use AI on our podcast to do our transcripts. So when we're done with the podcast, and then we have to make the snippets with the words, we throw it into AI, it cranks out the transcript, but then we, of course, review it, very closely, because it might not know how to spell like Sean. Is it S-E-A-N or is it S-H-A-W? How would AI know that if we're talking about a person that it doesn't know? So, and there's all sorts of pronouns and nouns that you need to make sure that you are covering. So it combats AI because it's real. You can't fake this. Maybe one day you can, but I'm not good enough to fake it. And the other thing is, but you can use AI for transcripts and other things that will help just save you time. Number 7, the podcast belongs on your website. It certainly can belong in other places. There's no question. But business to business gets done on a company's website. So make sure your podcast lives on your website, and all of the other platforms, while you can be in those other platforms, make sure that people know that they can go back to your website and get more value out of that podcast, because last I checked, business does not get done on YouTube. It does not get done on Instagram. It doesn't get done on TikTok. It doesn't even really get done on LinkedIn. Business gets done on company website. So the podcast needs to live on the website, because the website in business to business, the website is where business gets done. Plus, as soon as you get someone to your website, you can cookie them. When you cookie them, you can retarget to them, and retargeting is for sure probably the highest value marketing that you'll spend in your company, usually for most companies. Number 8, LinkedIn is your friend. It just is. In business to business, LinkedIn is your friend. So you definitely need to be peppering LinkedIn with the snippets and updates from your podcast. And then the other platforms, okay, whether it's the actual podcast platforms like Spotify or iHeart or iTunes or whatever, or the other platforms like TikTok or Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all of those are all what I call the carpool lane. The carpool lane means, listen, we've already created the podcast. We've already posted it on our website. We've already announced it on LinkedIn. Hey, you might as well keep it going and make different formats, the vertical and horizontal formats. You might as well put those on all of the other platforms too, because you're already going, right? So the more people you put in the car, just the more places you get to go. The effort is very little. So I like to say LinkedIn is your friend. It's the main place to announce this, and your website, of course. But all the other platforms, that's like the carpool lane. Don't not put extra people in the car. You can get everyone going to the same place, and it doesn't cost very much more. Number 9, keep it unedited. Okay, reality TV is proven to us that it is interesting when you don't edit things. And if you have a wart and say something silly or clear your throat or just leave it in there, it's just part of the program. The authenticity is really, what people are looking for in a format like this. I do see some people editing their podcasts, which makes sense. You edit it for the sizzle, the 50-second, 30-second, minute, the shorts. Go ahead and do the edits, and you only have like a attention span. You need to just do some sizzle. That makes sense. But the podcast itself, the conversation, I would say don't edit it, because there is it's not a film, it's not a commercial, it's a podcast. It will have some mistakes. That's the beauty of it. It actually helps you in the editing and the speed part too, if you don't have to worry about editing. So, and the last one is this: is when you have visuals. Cole, show me. I want to show them this Manning cast. I really like this technique. So I don't know if you know Peyton, Eli. They do this thing on the football where they did the Manning cast where they would play the game. This is our podcast studio, but the Manning cast, they would show the football game, and then Peyton and Eli, they would talk about the game. But what they learned, I think, at Omaha Productions, and what the network learned, is people like to watch people. Even if the game's on, it's just as much fun watching Peyton and Eli's facial expressions as they watch the game as it is watching the game. So, and then also, there's no editing involved either, because this is what we call our Manning cast view, and you might have 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, depending on how many people are on the podcast, and you can still use visual aids in your podcast, and you don't have any post-production work because we do this on the fly. We call it the Manning cast. So I would say, consider using the Manning cast, just to kind of stole from them. No shame there. It's pretty good production, and that's my 10th takeaway. So that's it. Those are my 10. Thinking about it, I probably have 10 more, because I've certainly learned a lot, and I appreciate you listening to this, and certainly appreciate you watching my podcast. You want to see more of the GoldenCom podcast, go to goldencom.com or check it out in the LinkedIn, several other places that you can find too, and I hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.